Can we start?
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Tokyo. My name is Mochtan, and I'm with the Asian Productivity Organization. Thank you for joining this session of Productivity Top Talk, where we are going to listen to expert opinions on matters relating to productivity challenges, productivity opportunities, and particularly related to business continuity, business confirmation, and business resilience under the current context of a very harsh circumstances caused by the COVID-19. I am very pleased that we have two distinguished speakers joining us, and these are leading experts on digital economy, and they will share their insights and experiences. Joining us from the US, from San Francisco, are Eric Lee and Lisa. Morning, Eric. Morning, Lisa.
Hi.
Good morning, Dr. Mochtan.
Sorry, I'm using the Tokyo time, but I don't know what time you are. This must be evening. So greetings to everyone in whatever time that you are listening to now at the moment. Eric Lee is known as, among others, as the co-founder of the LinkedIn, but he is actually a great entrepreneur, and he has founded so many companies. And Lisa is now with the Hub, based in San Francisco. And what I learned from her CV, one of her strengths is connecting the dots. And here is, we are connecting Tokyo, we are connecting San Francisco, and what can we do about this situation? May I start just with a question, Eric, because I think it's good to hear your update about the situation in the US. How is in the light of COVID-19, and especially how are businesses in the Silicon Valley coping with the situation? May I first invite Eric, then I'll go to Lisa, please.
Yes, certainly. Dr. Mochtan, thank you very much for the warm welcome. For both Lisa and myself, we're very happy to join you today. So in Silicon Valley here, it is certainly, in a way, the best of times and also the most challenging of times. So since early March, we've been in a shelter-in-place situation where, probably like many who are participating on this session, been asked to, stay within our homes and to only venture out for essential purposes. So that includes grocery shopping, going to the doctor if necessary, and getting gas for our vehicles. There's not too much driving going on. We're able to exercise and go outdoors if we need to do that. But work is mainly from home, and we've had to adjust to really a new situation in terms of interacting with our colleagues and fulfilling kind of the basic necessities around living, such as food and shelter.
Thank you, Eric. I think I did not give justice to you with my very brief introduction. So can I take one step behind and then invite you to introduce yourself more, so that I can do more justice with your such illustrious background? Eric,
yes, sure. Yes, sure. I actually was born in Vietnam, and then at the age of 7, I moved here to Silicon Valley in the US, to California and to the San Francisco area. And so I've grown up here, and I've been an entrepreneur of several high-tech businesses. As I was growing up, I was always into computers, and from a very young age, I developed a passion and interest for doing software development. And so I'm very fortunate to be, doing what I'm passionate about as a, profession since I was growing up as a kid. And so I've had a chance to really, become an entrepreneur. And as you know, there's a lot of entrepreneurial activity and an entrepreneurial culture here in Silicon Valley. And I've really had a, fabulous time in my life working with, everyone to create these companies and to create these businesses that hopefully offer value, out there in the world. Many of you might know of a platform called LinkedIn, where I was one of the members of the founding team. And I was able to leverage my talents and experiences to really contribute to that company. And the company was later sold to Microsoft after having gone public. So it is a platform that many people use to find employment, to find jobs, and also to develop business relationships with one another. So I've been very fortunate to have been a part of that journey, and we're working on some new things now that extend beyond what LinkedIn was able to do. And it's a very exciting time as innovation continues to move forward, and there's really no shortage of things to work on, even in this situation with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much, Eric. Now I would like to ask Lisa, and may I, Lisa, can you first introduce yourself? And then, like the question, I would like to have your observations on the situation, how the businesses in the Silicon Valley are actually doing amidst this condition. Please, Lisa.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Mochtan, for having us. Really happy to be here. So my name is Lisa. I was also born in Asia. I was born in China. I came to the US when I was 9. And I grew up in New York City. And after NYU, I was lucky to start a career in management consulting at Deloitte. So during that time, I got a chance to work with a lot of large companies and small companies in the US and also in Europe and also in Asia. And through that experience, I realized the key is really about getting the chance to work with great people and solving problems. And I love technology, so I moved to Silicon Valley and I joined Yahoo and worked in Yahoo for a few years. And then I met Eric. And then one of my passion is connecting the dots and connecting people. And after meeting Eric and hearing his mission is really about connecting communities, and that was why I joined Hub. And I feel like Hub enables me to facilitate connection of communities and also working with a lot of startups. So here we are today talking with you over in Asia. So I'm really happy to be here. In terms of the situation in Silicon Valley, so as part of my role at Hub, I actually work with a lot of partners overseas in Asia, in China, in Korea, and also in Europe. And we've heard about the coronavirus very early on happening in China back in January. So we saw the signals and we saw what was happening, and we actually reacted very quickly because we realized, this because of travel, that this is gonna, be here in the US pretty soon at some point. But it was somewhat alarming that things were still very slow to respond. I think what was interesting about Silicon Valley is that because a lot of tech companies are used to working from home, and because a lot of tech companies work with global communities, so a lot of us started working from home even before the shelter in. So I remember like early on when they started canceling conferences, like Facebook started canceling their conference, like the gaming GDC started canceling their conference. And I think it was like slowly it was happening. And then I think we as a whole, as a company, we started working from home very early. So we were just responding very quickly to it. And, as things the situation got worse, I see people adjusting to the new normal now. And I think at first it was very challenging, but now people are getting used to the new normal, and the situation is still bad, but I think people are responding to trying to figure out what to do next. And there are things I think we can work together to help.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Well, we have seen there are so many reports, and essentially most point to the same conclusion or assumption, and that is the economy is still bad. Yeah, but this talk is about hope, Eric and Lisa. Yeah, that I would like to have solutions or tips for solutions. Being resilient is one thing, surviving is one thing, but is that enough? What can we do more? Yeah. And yes, you both mentioned about staying at home, working from home. Yeah. That is the new normal. But how does it relate to productivity? Yeah. Is the new normal then giving us any new opportunities? And how is it that you see that the tech companies or even the non-tech companies can really continue to be productive under this quote unquote new normal? Can I invite, perhaps start with Lisa, and then we come back to Eric. Lisa, please.
Sure. I see a lot of industries having to change, right? If we think about education, for instance, now kids have to learn from home, right? Teachers have to teach from home. So that means they have to learn new tools, learn like how to use Zoom or other online platforms to transform. So that means retooling, right? So these industries have to retool. If I look at restaurants, for instance, they're the ones that are impacted a lot. So the ones that are not changing the way they do business are the ones that are, I think, suffering the most. The ones that are pivoting and really changing the way they operate are the ones that are surviving. Like, for instance, what I'm observing in the Bay Area is that, for instance, businesses that did not used to do takeouts before, do delivery before, they started doing delivery, and they start getting set up on these online delivery tools. So they're using technology as a way to help them connect to customers, because they have supply, right? It's really about connecting supply and demand. And so for the ones that are looking at doing that, they're able to stay afloat. And for the ones that did not have, for instance, gift card programs, they're now setting that up. So then that means they can sell gift cards, right? So that when the world gets better, they at least have a revenue stream. So there's programs are coming online now for them to get set up. Also, I see even small business owners working together to teach each other how to find these resources, and also to educate, right, small businesses, other restaurant owners, so they can learn from another. So like online learning is a mechanism that I see people doing. So those are some of the things that I think companies and businesses are pivoting as a way to be creative. And also another example that I seen, which was really amazing, was a lot of restaurants, they know how to sell things, and they have connection to all these suppliers, right? Like a restaurant, all of a sudden they become a grocery store, right? Because people need food. So instead of just selling their food, they're actually selling things like toilet paper or milk or bread, because they're connecting their community. So when I see that, it's amazing, because that means they're really thinking differently, and also they're also connecting to people who can also deliver for them. So anyway, so those are things I see that they are doing that are helping and giving hope.
Thank you. Can I invite your views, Eric?
Yeah, so I'm certainly a firm believer that in times of crisis, and this certainly is that there are amazing opportunities that exist. And in fact, I think the worse the crisis, the more amazing there are the opportunities. And so, we are all, as human race, trying to understand what's happening in the world today. But at the same time, we should give some thought about how we're going to recover, especially economically, from this situation. And so, what I've seen is that, all businesses and all industries have the opportunity to adapt themselves, to this new normal and to respond to new situations. And so here in the U.S., for example, there's been a lot of work, forward progress around telemedicine. The ability to deliver healthcare when people cannot get together, and so that's created really a lot of progress in this area for an industry that has for many years met with resistance to these kinds of activities. So telemedicine is really a booming area for us, and in many ways actually the technology that we're using to connect with one another, the tools that we have are actually going to improve as a result of the need that we have for continuing to connect with each other. And we're seeing changes and realizing that how much of the economy that we have today actually depends on people getting together in some form or another, whether it's at the store or at the restaurant, or many of these examples that also have to adapt and find new ways of doing things, not just with technology, but just in terms of new ways of delivering their products and services to customers. So I think within that there are just in a way kind of boundless opportunities to for industries to really reinvent themselves and to benefit and at the same time help us all going through this to recover from the situation.
Thanks, Eric. I guess the question is how fast? Yeah, we wanted them to transform. We wanted them to reinvent, but how fast can they do that? Now, at stake here is the jobs, Eric, because as we said that so many people, I don't know, maybe now millions people are on self-isolation, working at home, and then what will happen to the employment if the company is taking time to reinvent and whereas we are, as you said, it is very important for people also to get together. And can I put it also this in the context of the small and medium enterprises? As you know, in many countries, these are the largest entity of the economy. And so can you give us, Eric, first your views, your insight on this situation, on the agility, to innovate, to reinvent, and how it affects employment, and especially in the context of SME.
Yeah, certainly. So here in this country, there's been studies, that talk about the amount of unemployment that's going to result from this. The reports are, have a wide range, but they all pretty clearly point to the fact that the economic damage, especially to unemployment, is going to be pretty, great. There are some estimates that, talk about, 15% unemployment, and even more than that, maybe upwards of 35% unemployment. And so those numbers are just unprecedented. Whereas if, even a few weeks ago, the country was enjoying a period of unprecedented economic growth. And so one of the questions that get asked is who is this affecting, and what kind of recovery are we going to have? And it's fair to say that in this country, the people who are the most affected are unfortunately the SMB, the small business owners, because they are the ones that are in the kind of business where there's a lot of person-to-person interactions, and they also don't have a lot of reserves to fall back on when the businesses have been ordered to close, or the customers have been ordered to stay away. And so those are the companies, the businesses that are really impacted. And there's been a question of what kind of recovery are we going to have? There's kind of two common models. One is the kind of the V-shaped recovery, and the other one is the U-shaped recovery. And there's been a lot of debate about are we going to have a fast recovery, which is the V-shape, or are we going to have the U-shaped recovery? And I sort of feel that what's going to happen is that we're going to have a U-shaped recovery, and the reason for that is that the pandemic has really wrecked a lot of the kind of supply chain, the interdependencies between various industries, and to kind of get everything going again is going to take some time, even though things were going well before the pandemic. So in terms of how SMB is going to recover, I'm very hopeful for that, because small business owners are among the most entrepreneurial of anyone in the world. And so what we're seeing is people applying themselves to this new situation, even working together whether with each other small business owners, or even in a social impact with nonprofit organizations, to really help solve this problem. And the world does definitely have a lot of new problems to solve, and so I would be hopeful that from the SMB standpoint, that the opportunities to really for each of us in the industries that we've been, the things that we know how to do, how we can apply those the knowledge and the networks that we have to really solve the problems that exist today, and continue to create value for the rest of the world, which hopefully gets us back into the recovery mode as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Eric. I actually share very much with you about the underlining the hope. And in fact, a dear friend of mine at the early stage already reminded me that, quoting Charles Darwin, it is not the strongest or the most intelligent species that survive. It is the most adaptable. So I think that is the key. And if we translate into entrepreneurship is that perhaps then the meaning in this context is the acumen to look for opportunity. Yeah, to look into opportunity. There are always two sides of the crisis, that it is a threat, but it is also an opportunity. Lisa, can I now invite you? What is your what you take on the SMEs, please, Lisa?
Yeah, I think what I've observed is that the first step is really about the SMEs need to find the resources that exist right now to help them. Like in the US, for instance, there are a lot of government programs that exist right now. So helping SMBs find access to that, I think, is the first step, right? Once they have access to that information and get that those resources, at least they can sustain. I think the next step after they find these resources is to then identify new opportunity. Like you say, how do you adapt to the new opportunities? Almost like rethinking a little bit how the world could be and what services or products can be offered, right, in this new world that we live in. So I think it's really just rethinking about how things are done, because things will change, right? It cannot stay the same. If it stays the same, then it's really hard to survive. But the small businesses need to look at the resources and look at the opportunities and really pivot at what is the problem that can be solved today and in the future. And then that way they can pivot and adapt.
I would like to add a few more thoughts, Dr. Mochtan, if you would.
Yes, please.
Offer me is, one of the things that I realized was that, at the beginning of our, lockdown here in California, I really did assume that at some point we would return to some kind of life the way that we were before the crisis. But as time goes on, I really believe that we're not going to return to the way things were, and that we're actually going to be reaching a new situation. And the sooner that all of us realize that the world that we're going to be stepping into some weeks and months from now is actually going to be very different than the one that we left, the better that we'll be prepared to adapt and take to the new situation, as you said so eloquently. And I do believe, I mean, here in the U.S. there are lots and lots of small businesses that have let go of their employees. We've had I think 20 million people, maybe more, file unemployment claims to get unemployment insurance. And while in the middle of this, there are maybe a few companies that are hiring hundreds of thousands of new workers, particularly in the e-commerce type of areas. But when you compare millions of people that have been laid off and maybe hundreds of thousands of people that are hired, you see the imbalance in terms of the effect that this is having. And I do believe that a significant of those people who have become unemployed are not going to be able to return to their jobs, because there's just kind of a new way that we all have to work, and the new normal will come into being rather slowly. So we'll need to find jobs for those people who are displaced. And I do believe that the more that we can, each of us be entrepreneurial and become relevant in the new situation, the more that we're going to be able to recover. So it's a matter of us, all of us helping each other out, really, because this is a pretty unprecedented situation.
Thank you, Eric. And can I pursue from that when we are talking that helping one another? And I am actually particularly concerned about the new cohort of the youth, those new graduates. Yeah, in Japan, here actually March is a graduation time, and look at the lost opportunity for this group. Yeah. But if we take this as a temporary, then I would like to ask you, Eric and Lisa, then how would individuals should prepare him or herself under this situation? Of course, we know LinkedIn, this is a kind of the, what my colleagues call it as the Facebook for professionals. It is also the talents database. Yeah. And how would you advise these new groups of the young people, the new graduates who are really, really unfortunate, coming actually at a very, very difficult time? Can you share your tips for this group of people, for the youth, for the younger ones, please, Eric?
Yes, this is definitely a challenging time. I think about my own kids and, the the loss of the experience that they have, with their schoolmates, through these few months. We're doing our best to educate them at home, but the social interactions, the things that they're able to learn even better from their teachers, even though now a lot of that is virtual. There is some kind of loss there. There's a period of time where people who are graduating, are going to find it difficult to have opportunities. So I mean, I would advise those graduates to instead of looking for a paid job that might not be there, to see how they can at least get some work experience through either internships or just plain volunteering, and if they so choose to maybe group together and start some entrepreneurial pursuits. it's challenging. It's easy for me to say that, but to find resources, maybe from home or their support network, from their families, from their friends, financially, that will allow them to get some work experience. One of the things I do believe is that these are challenging times. Whoever can make it through, whoever can survive, will emerge that much more stronger when the world recovers. And so those people, those individuals, ought to be there, so to take advantage of that time when everything rises. And I think that's the best time to kind of reap the rewards of the investments and perhaps the sacrifices that we need to make at this point in time.
Thank you, Eric. I do share with you your wisdom that everyone will re-emerge stronger. Yeah. And Lisa, can I invite your views about this cohort of the young new graduates?
Sure. I would advise the new graduates to look to online opportunities. A lot of students tend to have they're very tech savvy, right? They use the latest technologies. I would say they stay on top of technology more than most people. And if I were to connect the dots, it's really then about how do you connect those skill sets that students have, right, with the people who need that skill set. So if we talk about, let's say, small businesses, they need help, right? They need help how to get set up online. They need help with social media. So I think these are opportunities that students can find online as a way to help these small businesses, either as an intern or as a volunteer. I think this is an opportunity that students can get this experience by seeking these online opportunities. So I would actually advise students to really seize the moment to just learn and access the online resources and also access the online opportunity. I do also think that mentorship is really important. So I would suggest that students reach out to mentors so that they can learn from people who maybe in the field, and then so they can still get that knowledge, and then they can use the opportunity to learn. Because, for instance, even if they were, let's say, use it as a time just to get online education, there's tons of online resources, right? Through every university, there's from all the schools, there's online, anything you want to learn right now, you can access it online. And then so I would spend time learning, and then I would pursue passions that you can build. And then I would, just use the skills that students learn to help small businesses and help others in this time of need. Like one story that I heard that was really heartwarming was like when the virus first became very serious in New York, a lot of senior citizens, they cannot go out to shop. So these students got together to start a nonprofit to shop for the senior citizens. They literally just gather a bunch of students together, built their website, and then rally thousands of people to go and shop for hundreds of senior citizens in New York City. So that to me is entrepreneurship. They actually created something out of nothing because they saw there was a need to solve a problem. And then they became founders, right? When they're still in college, right? So that to me is an opportunity, and that's a great example I think others should look to as a way to help and use their skill sets.
Thank you, Lisa. So in short, we must to keep the drive always, yeah, and look for resources. Now we have received actually many questions, Eric and Lisa. So let me now take time to read questions and that we have, some of the questions that we have received. And let me start from one from Antonio Palau. A long time from, hey Tony, thank you for joining us. And the question is that the new normal basically is for the professional, yeah? And how can the the labor, the low skilled worker cope with this new normal? Either we can start with Eric and then Lisa, please.
Thanks, Tony, for your question. I do believe this new normal affects all of us. Just earlier this week, if I may, relate a story, is I was actually talking to the owner of a farm, and they're having to adjust. They're part of the supply chain. The way that we buy vegetables and fruits in the stores, that has to come from somewhere. And so we were talking about that part of the supply chain in terms of how do farm workers get produce, continue to get produce into grocery stores that we all enjoy, but also to be working in a safe environment. So we live in a world today that is really interconnected. So whenever there's one part of the world, an industry that is impacted, it actually impacts everything else. And I think that's why I believe that the recovery is actually going to take some time, because to orchestrate all of these different industries to get them working again is going to take some effort. And so that's to say, I think everything matters, everybody matters, and so even being able to have opportunities in every kind of industry is going to be very vital. So I wouldn't say that there are industries that will go away. There's just going to be a new version of that has to be adapted to a different way of working. So here in the US, there's going to be a lot of emphasis around kind of workforce safety. How do we enable people to even get back to work, to get back to their places of working, and to ensure the safety of that. And even with that, there are opportunities to help create a safer work environment. And so to the extent that there are activities or opportunities that arise from that, I would say everybody is affected, and there's opportunities everywhere, basically.
Thank you, Eric. Lisa, can I have your views, please?
Yes. So I think the first step that's important is making sure that your family is secure and safe, right? And also making sure that you have information to stay protected, because to me, health, right, is number one. So I think getting access to that information so that you protect yourself and your family is very important. And then from there is then really about reaching out to your community or your network to find opportunities that may come up because of the situation. Like for instance, in the States, there's a lot of demand, for instance, for essential workers, right? People that provide the food, like at the grocery stores, people who, like Amazon workers, like delivery, right, service. So that there's actually a gap right there. So it's really about using those opportunities as a way to survive for now until things get better, but then have access to that information on those opportunities and just stay protected also during that process. So I would say those are the things that I would look at as a way to offer some advice to people who are dealing with this.
Thank you. We're still having many questions, and let me take up actually couples relate to SMEs. A lot of interest on the SMEs, and I'm taking one from Lee Yung Yung. Yung Yung is Singaporean working in Jakarta. Hey, thanks Yung for joining us. And this is actually about the government subsidy. Yeah, there is governments actually give incentive, if stimuli package, be that a tax break, for example. And I think this is a one-time rescue, and which is actually good rather than nothing. Yeah. But the question is, what if a government doesn't have that resources to help the SMEs. Yeah, that is from Yung Yung in Jakarta, a Singaporean. Another Singaporean, actually, he is Calvin Chan, and Calvin is in Singapore, truly in Singapore, and again on SME. And that the question is that what if I were to have an SME business? What should I do now? Yeah, and what should do I do after the lockdown? Yeah, so perhaps that I ask Eric to respond to Yung Yung question about the government, and especially if a government does not have resources to help the SME. Then the other question I'll give it to Lisa. Eric, please.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, I think, here in the US, we certainly have been fortunate to have some, government subsidies. And I do believe that's a necessary or at least highly useful, aspect, because with sort of this all of a sudden kind of shock to the system, people's paychecks are certainly affected, and their livelihoods are certainly affected. So that the government subsidies are, acting as basically a bridge, perhaps a temporary one, to get to the point where, at least, people can, make payments, whether it's rent or food or their mortgage, something like that, to, continue to, make those payments and keep parts of the economy, going. Um, we know that, we have a lot of, luck here in the U.S., but there are other countries that, might not be in the same, situation. And I do believe that, in those situations, maybe it isn't the, kind of monetary support that governments can give, but if there are sort of other, in-kind, services, and items of trade that can be offered, besides, money or financial, support, that, I think governments could hopefully look at that. I think every country has, natural resources, and just even, labor that can be, brought to bear, to this. And we just as a world, need a lot of, work. And so even if, certain services can be exported or imported, those might be areas where there's opportunities, for us all, to, work together to come out of this recovery.
Thank you, Eric. So I hope that also answer questions similarly on the role of government, and which we received from, say, Gerard Colombo in the Philippines. But I would like to now move on to Lisa on that question by Calvin. What should an SMEs, do now and after the lockdown?
Sure. I think there are a lot of people who want to help small businesses, but they might not even know how to help small businesses. And there's a lot of SMBs who are seeking help, right? I really do think another way that SMBs can seek help is by asking for help, by reaching out to communities. I would say even social media. I've seen like on social media groups where SMBs like, hey, I'm having trouble right now. I need some help. They share their story basically online. And then there are so many people reaching out, wanting to help solve the problem, jumping in to help. So I think it's okay to ask for help. And when you share it on social media, people will jump in and help you, be an advisor almost to you, right? To SMBs, and also support. Just like the example I mentioned about local restaurants. There's some local restaurants before, like in Chinatown, San Francisco, a lot of the restaurants, they were really suffering. But a lot of them, they don't really know technology, right? So they reach out like, hey, I need help. What can I do? So then you see all these very tech savvy people jumping in and say, hey, let me try to help, right? So you have this support network all of a sudden. So I think it's an opportunity to really share and reach out to communities or resources that may help. And I would say this is one of the reasons why actually we created even like a job hub or communities where people can post and share. So I invite communities to come online, and if they need help, even ideating, right? Think of us as like, find some small business consultants who can offer help. And like even things like GoFundMe campaigns, right? There are things like that, at least in the US, that small businesses are looking to as a way to help stay afloat right now. And other things I think we can do is, if we think about global communities, like there are resources and products and things that are, let's say, in overseas in the Philippines or or Southeast Asia or different countries, but people here in the US may want access to it, but we don't know how to get to it, right? We don't have to figure out how do we connect those things, but the only way we can figure out is someone asks and share like what's needed. Like for instance, when we think about PPE in the beginning, a lot of us can, PPE was a it was a short supply here in the US. So you know what people did in the US? Everyone who had e-commerce business was suppliers, they reach out to their personal suppliers overseas, in China, in Vietnam, right, all over the world, asking, can you send me some PPE so that I can donate them to healthcare workers? So these are the things we can do to connect the supply chain, because it's very broken right now, right? But if there's a way we can solve for it, we really need to come together. And I think it's okay to ask. And I would invite everybody to come on and, like I said, we actually set up a hub for people to actually share and ask for help. And then that way collectively, the word I call this is crowdsourcing, right? Like it's crowdsourcing of information, right? Share your story and crowdsource ideas, crowdsource solutions. And then people then can jump in to help. So that's what I would offer. And I can see this as a solution, crowdsourcing as a solution that for the immediate need, right? But it can be a long-term bridge builder in the future, right? To connect these solutions and maybe find other opportunities that people may not have thought of right now, right? So it's a real chance to solve the problem.
And I do believe that there are going to be new products and new services, arising out of this time. And so, just for instance, the fact that so many of us are working from home, kind of demands kind of new products to make hopefully our lives easier. Those of us who are not used to cleaning or even cooking, kind of our lifestyles that we used to depend on, has changed so much. I for myself, I'm really interested to get a haircut, and I can't do that right now. So are there some products and services that are going to be available that will allow me to accomplish what I want to do in a new way, while preserving social distancing. And so just this weekend, I gave my kids a haircut, and it was the first time that I actually did this. I gave anybody a haircut, and it turned out all right. My wife let me survive.
I like that, Eric. And just my personal comment, I think your hair looks okay. So it must be also the same for your son. We have actually overwhelming questions, but let me try to connect those questions and so that we can answer several questions at one time. Let me take one actually from William Lim from Singapore again, who mentioned that COVID-19 seems to have ushered a new quote-unquote isolation economy, replacing the sharing economy. And the question is, do you foresee that this will continue to persist even after the after the COVID has come down? And there is also a question about relating to this about the supply chain. Yeah, Lisa mentioned that it is very broken at this point of time. The question is whether now is it centralized from centralized supply chain to become decentralized, supply chain. So the question is basically whether the phenomenon we are seeing is just a temporary, yeah? Is it just going to be a reactive, or are they going to stay? Yeah. So can we ask Eric about this first, the isolation economy, and then I go to Lisa for the supply chain.
Yes, thank you for the question. We over the last few weeks, we've certainly, all of us been living a different kind of existence, isolated existence. But I'm a firm believer that as humans, we need to interact, face to face with each other, and we need to see people, and that's a very natural human instinct that will never go away. And so we're going to move into a new normal where, some of the things that we used to do in person are going to just be done digitally. So for example, I do believe that, maybe we'll be for a long time, flying less to have, business meetings. We'll be able to conduct more of those, using digital tools. But for really important occasions, we're still going to meet people in person, and we're going to, whether it's business or personal, we're going to want to do that. And so it's just that the boundaries will shift. And so, I do believe in that, context that we'll go back to the way that things were in terms of face-to-face interactions, and that we will not eliminate that. But we will also be living in a world where there's a greater need for safety, for interactions that are safe, right? Whether in a business context or in a personal context. So the need for testing, the need for assuring the results from those testing and reporting on that testing, so that all of us can be kept safe, not only from this coronavirus, but in terms of future infections and pandemics. That need's going to grow. And so that's a new sensitivity that we have now as people that we didn't have before. And so I think that kind of points to another opportunity of this new situation is, if we can establish new products and services that allow us to keep to be safe while interacting with each other, there's going to be some very interesting business opportunities in that area.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. Lisa, can I have your views about that supply chain?
Sure. I think when times are good, there's really no urgency to fix a broken system. I think the pandemic, it actually showcased that there's actually an issue and needs to be fixed, because it's about getting food to people, right? Recently in the news in the US, like we've heard that the big meat packing company, they're actually one of the biggest companies, because over the years they've centralized the supply of meat packing because it's of economies of scale. But because a lot of people were infected, now they have to shut down the Tyson, right? And because of that, now there's a shortage of meat, and also prices going up. So now when we look at the situation, like in the future, it's really thinking about how do you build contingency plans in that, right? Perhaps there should be more decentralized system where there are multiple providers, so that you don't have one point of failure. So right now there's one point of failure. So I think the pandemic just uncovers what needs to be fixed. But the good news is that I see fixes being implemented, right? So another example of supply chain that we've seen in the US recently is that there are a lot of farmers who are growing lots of food, and there are a lot of people that need food. The problem is they cannot get the food, right, from the farmers. because they don't have ways to get to them. So the farmers that, because they produce all this food that they were expecting restaurants to buy, now they don't have that demand by these restaurants. So so it was on the news actually that they were actually gonna, basically all the food will go to waste. So then someone saw, a group of people actually in New York City saw this on the news, and they said, hey, wait a minute, we have all these people, food banks, we need food, we need to get food to people. So then this group of people rallied together and went and create the distribution, basically to get shipments of food to be delivered from the farmers from Idaho to New York City. So you see people going and solving problems in real time to fix the supply chain. But I do think that after we recover from this, the infrastructure just will get better, because now we realize there's a problem, right? Just like after 9/11, I was in New York City at the time, a lot of companies, they had, like data centers, offices, all in Manhattan, right? Right after, when you realize like, hey, you need to have business continuity planning, a lot of companies started creating satellite offices in different parts of the country, so that, if something happens to this, this data center or this office, the whole company doesn't shut down. So I think it's really then the future is really about fixing the supply chain and then making sure that there's business continuity planning in place, and also there's not one point of failure. So, but I'm optimistic that the world is actually going to be better, because that means we're solving for it.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I actually have still so many questions, but I'll take one last one. And this happens to be from Vietnam, and it is being addressed to Eric. Yeah. And the question from our friend in Vietnam, Eric, is about reskilling and retraining. Yeah. With the new norm, a significant number of employees may be displaced. Then the question is, what type of reskilling and retraining for the new or relevant skills that you would suggest? Eric?
Yeah, I want to follow on to, Lisa's earlier answer in that there's really a lot of resources online, to enable us to, reskill, upskill, retrain. And so we should, all collectively, take a look at the body of content that's available, and, take this time, which are admittedly challenging, and there's, fewer economic opportunities to improve ourselves, professionally. I do believe also at the same time that, we're going to require, kind of new skills, right? Because we're all entering this period where really nobody knows what the answers are. There's so much of that going on that we see that we're all trying to figure it out. And so, to the extent that, we can look at the past in terms of what's known and the, educational resources that are there, and match that with, again, this kind of an entrepreneurial spirit to adapt to new situations. I believe that's really the key, ultimately, in terms of being resourceful. And then just finally, in terms of some of the, new areas, I do believe that we're going to see a resurgence, around, safety, and how we can, be able to interact with each other in many ways and ensure our safety. Digital is a part of that, but it's by no means the only part of that. So I would look at that as kind of an industry. And then, in terms of, what Lisa suggested also in terms of distributing, the supply chain and opportunities to, re-engineer that. I think that also points to some new opportunities that, we as, workers in the field can prepare for as well. So there's really, opportunities in many places because we're just in a new situation right now.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much, Lisa. I think we have come to the end of the discussion, although we still so many questions, but 1 hour actually passed so quickly. Let me just recap some of the points that we discussed, Eric. And as I said that in the earlier, what we are talking is actually we will try to look for solutions. Yeah, I very much actually feel close to you in terms of having hope. Yeah, and the way that we need to be optimistic, we need to be able to be supporting in each other, and especially also to be resourceful. And here is actually a real example of how we connect the dots between, at this time, Tokyo and San Francisco, and actually to so many other viewers. And let me invite you, Lisa, for your final comment before we close off, and then I go to Eric.
I think the human spirit is very strong. And I think during times of adversity, that's when I think we become stronger. It's really an opportunity for us to see how we can be better, how we can change for the better. So I would say just think of this as a time for change and adapting to the change, and then how to move forward, because the world's always changing, right? So we have to remain adaptable and resilient.
Thanks, Lisa. May I invite you, Eric, please?
Yes, first of all, Dr. Mochtan, thank you very much for giving Lisa and myself the opportunity to share our perspectives today. We've enjoyed talking with you and everyone else who's part of this. I would just add to what Lisa said, is that I think this is a very important time, and that I personally have felt a need not only to look out for the normal things that we do, but I'm really feeling a tremendous sense of mission, to help all of us who are affected by this, and that's everyone, to really get to a better place. So I feel a huge sense of mission and responsibility. So I hope that spirit can really become a part of what all of us do and does, and allows us to recover from the situation much more quickly, and get to a stronger place in the world.
Thank you very much, Eric and Lisa. And I would like to especially thank our viewers, those who have tuned into this session. And I sincerely hope that this has been useful. And we will continue with the discussion. This also will be recorded in the APO website. And then you may please continue to share with your friends. And we look forward to the next session. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.